Gilligan, and of course, alongside me, reforming the dream team that is the FRS Division 1 commentary team, it is Mr. Sean Provenza, aka Quimbula. Sean, we're back!
We are back, and I got my mic working, back working just in time. I'm trying to grab who is furthest around. There's one of these blue cars. Usually it's Elliot, but it's not this time. Somebody's starting a lap.
I believe it is MJ Povey.
It is. That would be a good call. And it is indeed MJ Povey, first driver down into the opening section. Let's see what kind of early times we're setting. We saw some high to mid 27s in the open division race yesterday. Where do you think they might get down to, considering esports was getting down into the high 26s?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, our drivers get faster and faster here in the FRS every single season, and this is unlikely to be any exception to that rule. It's, of course, a bit of a mixed difference here, though, in Division 1 this season. I'm making an effort to not say PC Division 1, but there's 6 seasons worth of me saying that, so apologies in advance if I do get that right, because, of course, we do now have, as you can see from the list of names down the left-hand side of your screen, a mixture of different players from different platforms. We have finally got crossplay in a workable state in league racing at this stage, and so as a result we've now got ourselves just good old Division 1. No PC about it. It is just Division 1 now, and well, that means that we're going to have an interesting time seeing who is going to be quick and who is not, because of course Xbox, PlayStation, PC, before they all operated in isolation of one another. And whilst you could point out the quick drivers in those divisions, Povey being one of them, as they come up to cross the line now and set our benchmark time at 1:28.1. That then is a marker for them to lay down for the rest of the field, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how everybody then starts to shape out in terms of their overall competitiveness. And given that we do not have any of the reigning PC Division 1 champions returning for this season. No Fraser, no Spike, no Silver Arrow, and, well, K-Tomatic's been gone for a while, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, he has, and it's going to be interesting to see all these drivers coming together as you're seeing times pour in. Clem was one of the quickest ones yesterday, and by the way, chat, I see your notes. I had to rebuild a lot of the audio levels in the off-season because of OBS updates. Let me know as we go if things need to come up or down, and I will make those adjustments, and we'll get everything dialed in, because once it's set, it's pretty much good for the season. But a lot of drivers into the mid-low 28s, kind of an unrepresentative time from Queasy there, and it looks like we may have a Cruzo facing the wrong way so far in this one. But yeah, it is going to be a mixture, I would say, of the, mistakes being made, calling it PC Division 1 over and over. I think it's forgivable this season because, it is ingrained. But there is now just Division 1, Division 2.
Certainly is. Certainly is. Now, it should be noted that, of course, with this change in things and with this new order to the field and this new way in which we're formatting the divisions, it means that we will have our first ever FRS Division 1 champion by the end of this season. Even if we did have the likes of Fraser and Silver Arrow and so on, they would not, their existing championships would only count in a PC-only division. As it is, we've got ourselves this brand new setup and drivers of all differing abilities, but certainly right now it's looking like we've got 2 championship protagonists starting to come out in the form of the Constructors' Championship here. Both Williams, both Red Bulls make up our top 4 at the moment after the first run of laps.
Yeah, I mean, Williams coming into the season, and I talked about it a lot at the end of the open division race. There was a ton of talk about, Williams just being a very strong teammate pairing, because you take a look at the Xbox division. Of the 6 seasons, 5 of the championships were won by the 2 drivers that are sitting in Williams today. And of course, Clem coming off of a very dominant championship in PlayStation last season, also won the Most Improved Rookie Award, which, as I said during the awards show, typically you get the Most Improved Award goes to somebody who joins up, starts near the back of the field, and kind of works their way into points. I mean, Clem was a top 5 driver from race 1, but they got so dominant over the course of that season that they ended up getting the Most Improved Driver Award for an FRS rookie. So they're quick, and now they have an opportunity to prove it. And then, of course, Castleman in reserve at the moment. is in that other Red Bull seat. As back end comes around on Cruzo. He'd already invalidated that lap, so wasn't really going to hurt him. We are about to have one of the Tifosi start a flying lap, though. So let's ride on with another Xbox driver, Habs fan Nick, who is getting up there in pace. Has driven really well last season. We'll see if he can carry it over to the crossplay division.
Absolutely, yep. So into turn number 1 then, hooking it through the apex nicely there. Maybe not bringing it quite as far over to the right-hand side to open up turn 2 as much as they possibly could, but through 3 and up towards 4, it looks clean and tidy so far. Now they're making as much use of the track as possible, and a little bit more, just dipping a tyre over the outside curb on entry, and then swinging through to the apex there nicely before then powering into this second sector. Purple in the first sector for Habs fan Nick. So a very good start then, and could this be potentially the first time that Ferrari have ever looked competitive in an FRS season I've commentated on? That is an interesting thought. But there we go then. So down towards this tricky turn number 10 then, one of the most difficult corners, and there you can see why, invalidating the lap and going straight on, just hooking the car up and over the outside curb there. Just a bit too far there for Habs fan Nick.
Yeah, just a little bit over the line, and you know, Habs fan Nick he doesn't quite have the raw pace that a Povey or a Nemesis does, and he needs to really stretch to the exact limits of the track to kind of maximize that, and you saw that in turn 10, which could be a hot zone, not a typical overtaking opportunity, but you saw him, he was getting right up near the line, and then it was just a tiny bit of a snag of the brake, and then it was too much, and he ran over the line. So tricky little spot, and of course, lockups don't help you very much around here either, considering you're trying to keep the tires alive. It is a pretty heavy degradation track. We shouldn't see the softs in a race situation unless there's, you know, a 5-lap shootout with a late safety car.
Absolutely, yes indeed. So, just coming over the line now to start another lap then is MJ Povey, closely followed by Clem as well. So our top 2 are off to start another lap then. They're pretty much on their own at the moment. They've got their own little bubble to operate in, good amount of time between one another, and then of course a massive gap both in front and behind as it is. So it's going to be interesting to see here then. Let's see what Povey is able to do. So through towards the exit of turn number 4 then. Looks like they've gotten that all gathered up nicely. Now, Povey has, of course, made appearances in PC Division 1 as it used to be, of course, but they never really seem to find the same levels of success that they did in the Xbox division. So maybe with a bit of further development in Xbox and now coming across to crossplay, it could be that Povey now has that experience and that wherewithal to know then how to place the car better than the drivers in PC here. Certainly that's the way it's going so far. The highest PC driver currently in third with Major Castleman, and then Clem also doing very well behind here. Just taking a look at the two of them, separated by about 5 seconds on track at the moment. So if we were operating by normal F1 rules and thought as far as aerodynamics were concerned, you'd be looking at a nice tow for Clem round the lap at this point. But through the second sector, then it's purple for MJ Povey, so not in the first, but in the second they do. And now down towards the last couple of corners, then they might get the ever so slight distant tow of this group of cars in front of them here. But now as they come out of the final turn, up towards the line, will Povey improve? Yes, they do, by about 1/10 of a second. What can then Clem do behind? It looks like they are good, but it's not good enough. By 300ths of a second, they're a bit too slow. It's still very much game on here with just over 7 minutes left to go in this session.
And Dante's had a bit of a spin there. I was trying to find which of the McLarens was about to cross line. Cruzo warming up for a lap is, yeah, still very close. We are just beyond the halfway point of this qualifying session. Of course, it's race number 1. We should probably go over FRS format for anybody who's joining us that's not seen FRS races before. We do an 18-minute single qualifying session, no Q1, Q2, Q3, just 18 solid minutes, whoever sets the best lap. So with 7 minutes left to go, still a little bit of time to go. And then that follows straight into a 50% distance race, which around here at Bahrain is going to be 29 laps.
Absolutely, yes indeed. And at the moment we are on board then, or rather watching from a distance at God Emperor Cruzo, bloodthirsty dictator of the FRS, who deserves a shout out, I think it's fair to say, for all the hard work they've put in behind the scenes in putting together a lot of our new rule sets and type forms and other bits and pieces so we could go racing this season. So thanks very much to Cruzo for that. I promise to give him absolutely no preferential treatment, however. If he goofs, then he's going to get a good ribbing from me. It's only fair, I think. So, That being said, though, it's a purple second sector for Cruiser. Where on earth has that come from? I tell you what, though, it might have all been undone by that big snap of oversteer they had there coming out of the right-hander at the start of the third sector. Down towards the final corner they come then. Whereabouts are they going to stick this McLaren? After a slow lap round just to get the tyres warmed up. Let's see what they're able to do then. Across the line comes Crusoe. And it's P14. So a car that is clearly set up very well for the twisty bits, but might be struggling on the straights.
Yeah, well, and keep in mind, there's still that lovely little purple Sector 2 bug that exists there. Sometimes they'll show purple Sector 2s when people have not necessarily gotten a purple Sector 2, which makes for some excitement.
Bugs in a Codemasters game?
Yeah, I mean, it's been around since, I think, 2020. It's kind of...
Bugs in a Codemasters game that have lasted for more than one game? Color me surprised.
Let's hop on.
It's happened already, everybody. I'm afraid
he's got a valid lap this time. Well, you made it into the first qualifying session of the first race, and you know.
I made it about 10 minutes. Yeah.
Look at that purple second sector. It's not true.
Purple second sector, according to the map, but we'll not believe that, I think. So through the final turn, then, what is Habs fan Nick able to do then after a very impressive first sector? Second sector, potentially ambiguous. Up to the line. P9 for Habs fan Nick inside the top 10 then. That's not bad at all. They've got plenty of time now to get back round, get into the garage, and get a new set of boots on to go one more time.
Yeah, let's see if who we can find that may be on a lap. Again, they just love all
False Tax looks to be on a lap at the moment.
They love the blue colors, so I'm like looking up and down and trying to find blue. Because I see a blue dot far around. But yeah, let's jump on with False Tax. You got him, and of course, you said False Tax, and because of last season, him being in the Alpine, I immediately started looking for a blue notch next to his name. No, he's in the Haas this time, alongside of MML Ruprath, who, man, a driver who's been on an upward trajectory over the past 2 seasons. Ruprath, we are going to have to see, and that is a tricky bit.
I mean, that's a perfect 360. That's a very well done there from False Tax.
Let's see how much time he lost when he crosses the sector split. He's lost about 4 seconds. I think he was about a second down on his first split. But, you know, it's a very clean little recovery.
It's not too bad, yeah. I mean, the tyres probably won't have thought that would be the most wonderful experience in the world. But, you know, that being said, we'll see now. Yeah, they go into the pits then. They will probably have enough time, but as a cheeky dive into the pits, they're at absolute full speed. But it's, it's going to be a bit crunch time for them, really, once they get going here. Now then, in terms of the driver we're seeing on screen at the moment, then, this is Nemesis once more.
Just on an out lap, getting warmed up. Pretty much everybody getting their last tire changes in before, and it looks like Nemesis will probably be the first to set the final times here.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got Queasy Pluto as well in P13 currently, so that's a driver who will want to be making their way further up the field, and definitely the ability to do so. Dante just in front of them, only 0.004 of a second ahead. So if nothing else, they are very, very close together, and there's definitely some room there for them to be fighting. Then we've got, in terms of the rest of this field then, MJ Povey still leading the way, of course, by that 0.03 of a second to Clem behind. Then Elliott has replaced Major Castman as the highest PC player on our list currently. Then QX Nemesis, who we're on board with at the moment. Then Major Castman, Cryptic, Mako, Ruprath, Housefan Nick, Daredevil, Latza, Dante, Queasy Pluto, False Tax, and Cruzo at the back of the grid currently. As we see now, Nemesis going onto a lap in the Williams. Down towards turn number 1 then, breaking around that 100-meter board, very brave, chucking the car in then, making good use of those early gear shifts, minimizing that wheel spin as they get onto the power. Of course, full electric deployment throughout this lap, 160 extra brake horsepower from the modern hybrid units of Formula 1 powertrain. And as they go through turn number 4, it's looking reasonably good for them this time. It's actually slower, though, by 1/10 of a second than their personal best. So currently, if we were to extrapolate that prediction, that would be a 28.4 for them over the course of the rest of this lap, which would not be what they need. They're going to need to now make up about half a second or so in just 2 sectors.
Yeah, as they're hitting the last kind of big DRS, taking a bit of slipstream off of the car that's doing their outlap there, taking every advantage that they can. It looks like somebody has knocked out the brake marker boards down into turn 11 there. So that will make things a little trickier for those who are not running with the racing line. I know Habs fan Nick typically doesn't run with any racing line or any assists of any kind, so look for him to maybe have some trouble in that space. But yeah, that may also be why he struggled in turn 10. But we will see in the last corner here if Nemesis is going to find some time to maybe supplant Elliott in the inside the top 3. Decent run out of the final corner. And he does. He finds
it's a big improvement.
3/10.
Goodness gracious me, if not for that slower first sector, that would be Nemesis on provisional pole. As it is, probably a bit too late in the session now for them to be able to go again, and in fact, with them having pulled over to the side there to allow the Mercedes of Daredevil through, it's definitely too late now. So eyes now go to Clem in the Red Bull. On their time lap now then, let's see what they can do. Now, they were looking pretty handy in the first and third sectors, so that second sector is potentially where they need to find the time relative to everybody else. Let's see then, through turn number 4, a bit wide of the apex then, and as they come up towards the split time, they are 500ths up on their previous best. That puts them on provisional pole for now, but let's see what the rest of this lap has in store. So, through the hairpin and back up the hill now, up towards 9 and 10. These corners then, reasonably tricky. 9 is all right if you can get the car straightened up to then take 10 as easily as possible. Out of the exit then and onto the DRS straight. Powering down the back here now then. Getting that tyre hooked up over the edge of the circuit to try and open up turn 11 as much as humanly possible. And then hitting the apex nicely there. Climbing back up the hill. Avoiding the Mercedes on the inside, or the Alpine, or whatever it was that was on the inside there. And then up towards through... And the end of the lap, they're currently now 7,000 down, and they've invalidated their lap, and just a bit too much. That means Clem will not improve, but one driver who could potentially improve, no, not this time actually, as I just switched to Elliott, and they go round. So they're not going to improve.
It looks to have had some improvements over the first 2 sectors, at least the quick
big
flip.
Improvement.
Yeah, almost half a second. We'll see if that is indeed the case when he crosses the line. 27.90, he is on provisional pole.
Pole for Major Castleman. Let's see then. MJ Povey is now coming out the final turn as well. Will they be able to come across the line, improve their time? Let's wait and see. No, it's not enough. Povey ends up going slower than before. They had a bit of a wobble at the line there, and that's then denied them pole. And that then means that Major Castleman takes the first pole position of FRS Season 7. Unless, of course, anybody is out there to take it away from him. Currently, the only driver I can see who is in any reasonable chance to do that would be Habs fan Nick. Let's see what the Ferrari can do up to the line. And it's P6 for them. Good attempt, good effort from Habs fan Nick, but on this occasion, not going to be enough to challenge the might of the blue cars up in the top 4 positions. So, to give you the rundown of your provisional order then, unless, of course, no, Crusoe has invalidated their laps, so... Yep, in terms of what we see here then, Major Castleman takes pole position at the Bahrain Grand Prix with MJ Povey alongside. Then just tucked in behind Major Castleman is the teammate of the driver alongside them, that being Nemesis. Then it's Clem rounding out an all-Williams, all-Red Bull front 2 rows. Then we have Elliott in the AlphaTauri. We've got Habs fan Nick in the Ferrari, then Mako in the Aston. We've got Cryptic in the Alpine. Ruprath and False Tax making the 2 Hassis line up alongside one another. Then we've got one of the Alfa Romeos, and I'm now going to have to wait for the results to come back up. We've got Queasy Pluto in P11. And then after that, it is Daredevil GG in the Mercedes car, and then Latza in the Alpine, and the 2 McLarens of Dante and Crusoe then round out our grid of 15 cars here today. Well, after a session like that, Sean, I'm really looking forward to this race. Now, Bahrain is usually very good for racing, and we've got drivers who are separated in the top 4 by just about a 10th and a half of a second.
Yeah, and when you scroll all the way down to P13, Latzo just outside of 1 second. I mean, 13 drivers within 1 second on quali pace, and I'm looking at the Div 1 chat right now. A couple of drivers saying that they bottled their laps. I mean, guys like Cryptic could be right there on race pace. Daredevil as well, so it should be very, very interesting to see how it goes in this main race. Now, I'm going to preemptively do this thing because, oh wait, we might have immersive formation lap on. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm preemptively silencing it just in case Crofty starts talking. But word is that immersive formation lap is functioning, and somebody is readied up just about immediately. So we'll be right underway very quickly.
Certainly shall. Certainly shall. And, well then, nobody's messing around here, or at least one of the drivers isn't. So, yeah, shot of the pit lane as we get ready to go racing. And, yeah, hopefully on this run down towards turn 1, we all keep it clean, keep it sensible. Of course, there are brand new stewarding rules in place for this season. You now have a limited number of stewarding inquiries you can make. And then let's see here. Looks as though we do have a full immersive formation lap.
Great. So I will bring the audio back up for the game. We'll take a look at the tires. Everybody starting on either mediums or hards. Of course, lots of drivers did not have a whole lot of chance to set their strategies because somebody readied up right away. May have been one of our new drivers who is not quite familiar with it, but Castleman on the hards with 2 drivers with mediums right behind him, Povey and QX Nemesis. So that is a stacked Williams team that is going to be hunting down that Red Bull right at the start.
Absolutely. I think there's perhaps, for those on the hard tires, I think there's maybe a hope or a belief in a safety car, or possibly in a race not affected by a safety car, in the hopes that everything goes according to plan, that then allows them to get onto the faster tires towards the end and chase down after those who would be on the slower, harder tires at the end, with the likes of those starting on the mediums. So it could go either way in this one. Of course, we do have a lot of experienced drivers here, some newer faces as well to the league, so it's going to be interesting to see just how everybody ends up coming together here in turn number 1, whether it's all clean or whether we have our patented FRS shambles.
It is race number 1, so we'll see what's going to go on. Yeah, yesterday in the open division, we were mostly seeing drivers that started on the hard tire were getting a good benefit from the fuel level burning off. They were actually getting a little bit quicker up until about the midpoint of their stint when tire deg started to take over. Medium tire runners were pretty much at their pace for a few laps, and then the tire degradation took over. So the hards, if they can maintain the lead on the medium tire runners, they can build a little bit of a gap towards the end of their stint. And of course, it gives them strategic flexibility if they want to go long. We're looking at probably 12 to 13 laps of life for the pit window for the medium tire runner starters, and then around laps 16 to 18 is when you might see the hard tire runners come in. We did have Tim Alele, though, try the hard to soft strat, and the degradation was just way too high. They really didn't last hardly at all.
Well, as you can see then, we have got Major Castleman parked up in their grid slot about as far forward as you could possibly be. With this year's game, of course, you can get really far forward in the box if you want to tempt fate. Habsfan Nick, though, has just gone that little bit too far and end up being disqualified for parking too far forward in their box. They will therefore be parked further back in their box in order to compensate for that. Same for Ruprath, same for Latza as well. But now we have all our drivers on the grid. We are ready to go. We have 5 red lights, lights out, and away we go for Season 7 of FRS. This is a great start for Clem in the Red Bull. Look at them now challenging Nemesis down and towards turn number 1, but it's the fight at the front. Povey versus Castleman down into the first corner. We're seeing traffic lights instead of the race. Now it switches to the race, and look at that, Major Castleman gets back in front, hangs it all the way around the outside, is able to get past MJ Povey. What a brilliant recovery there from that driver. Nemesis has been able to get back past Elliott as well, being able to use those medium tyres to good effect, but Povey missing out on the opportunity to take the lead of this race and start to disappear off into the distance with those fresher, younger medium tyres versus those hards, of course.
Yeah, Mako's dropped down the field, and yeah, sorry for the camera angle that the game chose at the start. I just had to grab somebody in the midfield and jump on board to try and see anything. But it looks like down further in the field, there is a bit of scrapping going on. Latzo side by side with Mako as they head into turn 9 and 10. Is there going to be enough space? It looks like around the outside, Mako's going to hang it out and try and go for it. But the front group, Castleman almost a second ahead now of MJ Povey. But QX Nemesis, Clem, all holding positions so far after the start of this one. A clean start for an FRS season.
Clean start, absolutely. No damage that I can see on any of the cars. There are some who have definitely lost out more than others, though, in this one. Mako, Habsfan Nick, both falling down the order in a big way. Daredevil GG has managed to jump their way up the field, as has Queasy Pluto as well. So those two drivers incredibly good off of the start, it seems. And Cryptic has gotten right in there as well, that we can see right up the back of Elliott at the moment. I would hazard a guess that they're going to get this move done here down towards turn number 1. And it might even get it done before we get to turn number 1. But further up, the way here. There's a little bit of a look to the inside from one of the Williams drivers, as we see there that move being done by Cryptic. Managed to just get their nose ahead of Elliott there, and they move that Alpine up into P5.
Ooh, and around goes Ruprath. He was dueling with Habs Van Nick coming out of turn 3, needed a good exit, and that's just the area where a little too much right foot can get you into trouble. It looks like Cruzo has had to bail out. I don't know if there was contact between them. I think Cruzo just had to slam on the brakes to avoid a major collision, and that's cost him a fair bit of time. Wings seem to all be attached, but let's get back to the front of the field where Povey and Nemesis have been championship rivals for 6 odd seasons now, and here they find themselves in the same team. How much working together do you think they're going to do, or do you think they might be trying to stake a top slot, see who is the #1 driver early on?
Well, all's fair in love and war, isn't it? But I have a feeling that not knowing them as well as the PC drivers for obvious reasons, having covered PC Division 1 for the past 6 seasons here on the channel, but I have a feeling that based off of what we've seen in those title battles, how it has been very close at times between them, it might be that they end up coming to blows sooner than their team boss may like. They have definitely got some good pace as we've seen so far in this race, but Major Castleman, I must say, has really impressed me so far. Fastest laps now for the Williams duo, who are now starting to battle one another, it seems. Doesn't look as though Povey is really going to give this one up into turn #1. They're getting very close indeed between the two cars, and Nemesis moves up into P2 then. Further back, Clem is having to fight off Cryptic and Elliott. Oh, they both come together! Elliott and Cryptic make contact with each other in turn #2, and they fall massively down the order. Both of them now outside the top 10, outside of points. That then promotes Daredevil and Queasy Pluto, who have swapped positions in the course of the last lap or two. And, well, dear oh dear, Cryptic all the way down the order, now overtaken by Cruzo as well. This is not the way that you would have expected them to go fighting in the first race, but as it is then, that is certainly a changing of the guard then up and down the order here today.
Yeah, and coming from Xbox, I've raced against Cryptic quite a few times in the past. He is an absolutely rapid driver. He's plenty quick, but he does have that tendency to occasionally get just kind of caught up in a little incident with somebody that costs them a huge amount of time, and they find themselves fighting through the field. They've had some dominant wins, even when the likes of Nemesis and Povey have been on the grid in Xbox, but when mistakes are made, they fall off, and it looks like, saw for a second on the rear of the second Williams, MJ Povey's car, that rear light was flashing. So he's burning a lot of ERS to try and keep up, and he's almost falling out of DRS of Nemesis, and Nemesis just hanging with Castleman. Did Povey get
so, in
that?
fact.
He's still got the little bit of wing open, but he is low on battery, so he is doing a lot of work to try and keep with it.
Ooh, look at this into turn #1. Sorry to interrupt you there, Sean, but look at this. Into turn #1, it is Williams versus Red Bull. That's a phrase that's never been said before, and now as they go up towards turn #4, then it's very close indeed between the pair of them. Nemesis has now just got a sniff ahead in the lead, and now coming into the corner, they take the lead convincingly. But is it going to be a cutback now for Major Castleman? No, not this time, but with the Red Bull having stayed ahead for 4 laps, it's likely that the current strategy option is in their favor at this point in time. Ayak in the chat pointing out that the Alpine curse is still very much alive and well. It is definitely looking that way at the moment, but yeah, absolutely well observed earlier on, Sean. Falstack's out. Dear oh dear, what on earth has happened to them?
He's off through, he may have been launched by the curbs and got all the way into the barriers heading into the hairpin, and
yeah,
it's just a local yellow. The car is cleared, so no safety car or VSC in this case. But yeah, Nemesis played it well. He stayed just behind at the second detection point, so he still had DRS going down towards turn 4, as opposed to making the move fully in turn 1. And Nemesis now needs to kind of run away and use those medium tires while he's got them. Otherwise, those hard tires, with every lap, the pace delta gets smaller and smaller between the two.
Absolutely it does. Povey is doing well to hang on to the back here. We can still see from the back of that Williams car that the red light is flashing. And given that we are not under any wet conditions, there are no intermediates or full wets fitted to that car, that means that they must have less than 10% ERS remaining. That is the only time when that light comes on in the game. It is there to indicate to the car behind that you may not be going particularly quickly. Of course, in the real world, that is also to then indicate that you have a car which is potentially derating, or you might be harvesting down the straights, and therefore you'll be braking earlier or traveling at a slower speed, so the closing speeds will be higher. But certainly what we see here then is there's a bit of a two-horse race going on now. We've got the top three disappearing off into the distance, really, and then Clem struggling to keep a pace with them. Now, at this stage, I should point out that that is not necessarily a bad thing and not necessarily reflecting badly upon the pace of Clem there, because they are on those hard tyres, but without the use of DRS, they're not able to stick with that little train that's disappearing off into the distance, and it's something which Povey is, of course, at risk at as well of losing. They are now only 9/10 off the back of the car in front with DRS open, and of course Major Castleman has had DRS on the back of Nemesis as well since they have been overtaken, so that Red Bull very much sticking with the Williams cars at this stage, but it's at this area here, the end of the second sector onto the third. This is where it might be that the gap starts to come back. Oh, I was about to say open up again, but down again actually is the case. Looks like that car for the Red Bull driver is set up for straight line speed. Definitely something which is proving to be a bit more of a handful through the corners in Sector 2, where they're trying to stay onto the back, and that's where they lose that time. But then, down the straights, it is a rocket, this car. Not too dissimilar, of course, to the Red Bull of this year. Also, bad times in the other Williams, though, for Nemesis. Whilst they do have the lead, they are not, as you point out there, Sean, disappearing off into the distance, and they are also starting to show that D-rating light as well. Less than 10% for them, and Povey has now fallen outside of DRS range of the top two.
Yeah, we got a battle between Habs fan Nick and Queasy. Nick almost back up into his starting position, had a little bit of a nudge in the lead, but looks like he's used up a lot of battery to do it. Oh, he's later on the brakes than Queasy is, tries to look around the outside, but Queasy, who's gained a lot of positions, Daredevil, of course, running kind of in their own air now, up 7 spots. A good run for the debut driver here, first time in the FRS, but lots of fights going on through the midfield. There's not a huge amount of spread through here. There's a couple little gaps, but otherwise, drivers are kind of picking their way through. Cryptic back up to 12th now, has made their way beyond Cruzo and Ruprath, but now has 5 seconds of clean track to get reattached to the next battle.
Absolutely, yes, indeed. And so as we have a look at this then, we've got Bonomi in the chat saying, wish I was there. I wish you were as well, Bonomi. But there we are. We've got this great fight, this good scrap going on at the front then, where again, Nemesis is trying to break this DRS toe that Major Castleman has got on them, but they're doing so by burning up a lot of ERS. Now, it looks as though Castleman is also doing the same. Their red light is now also flashing, but they have this benefit of a good straight line speed setup. They have DRS, and crucially, they also have those hard tyres on, which as we rack up more and more laps, that pace deficit between the two tyres will not only get smaller, but eventually will invert, and we will then start to see those hards being faster than the mediums. When that happens, you're going to then see the two Williams cars diving into the pits, I'm sure. Meanwhile, further back, Elliott has been able to get the move done. On Latzer, it looks like here, yep, on the drive out of turn 3, then up towards 4. They do have the place. They've also got DRS, so it looks like they're safe for the time being, and so up into P9 for the AlphaTauri driver, and they're going to be hoping to find their way a bit further up this order here after a disappointing collision between themselves and Cryptic a bit earlier on. Sent the pair of them a bit further down the order, but there we are then. That is racing. It can happen at times. Just ahead of them, you've got a great battle at the moment between Queasy, Habs fan Nick, and Mako. The three cars all very close together. The Aston in particular practically pushing the Ferrari through the turn number 10 there. And as we go up towards turn 11 then, both cars have DRS, but it looks like the Aston's just got an ever so small advantage in straight line speed. But as they come towards turn 11, it doesn't materialize in any sort of a move or anything at this time. So on their push up the hill they go then. They've got to be careful of this corner. It's always been a tricky corner in the F1 games, but now then into turn number 13 and pushing down towards 14-15 to round out the lap. It looks like things as they were right now for Queasy, Habsfan and Mako. Up at the front, it looks like Castleman has all got the DRS once again, so it's sticking there with Nemesis, and Povey is dropping back. So might be needed a different strategy at this stage for the Williams driver in second. But no, look at this, Habsfan Nick closing in, closing with the DRS open. They're going to go hard to the inside here. Where is this move going to go? Is it going to shape out for them? It looks like it might not, and Mako might now swing it all the way around the side. And yes, they do, and it's contact between Habsfan Nick and Queasy Pluto. Just a touch up the back there. It looked like Pluto may have lost the car before that contact was initiated, but it hadn't evolved into a full spin until that contact was made. away, but brilliant driving from Mako and the Aston Martin, being fully aware of what was going on, positioning their car to take advantage of any attempted overtakes, or, as it turned out, any potential spills.
Yeah, heartbreaking for Queasy. It's one of those spots that went almost 3 wide there, and you know, that's a spot where it's just so touchy on the throttle. I couldn't tell if there was contact. He did have a big kind of swapper, and maybe there was contact, maybe he was just a little aggressive trying to get back on the throttle. But for Habs fan Nick down into turn 1, that was a case of he had no choice but to try and make that overtake, because Mako had the run on him already. So Habs fan just had to pull out, try and make the overtake, and it turned into quite the mess. Habs fan Nick now has to try and close up the gap, and this has also brought Elliott and Latzo right into the fight with this group as well. Major Castleman, though, looks like at the last detection point is outside DRS now, so Nemesis is finally starting to break that, but 9 laps into about a 12 to 14 lap. Oh, don't do this to me.
Across the line to start lap number 10 of this 29-lap race, and Castleman still very much with them there. Nemesis has been trying to move this way and that on the circuit to try and break the toe, but it's not really been working for them. All of the top 3 running with less than 10% ERS now, all 3 lights flashing, but Castleman looks a lot more racy and a lot closer this time than what they have done previously.
And
we've got ourselves excellent, very good, and we can see them now then just half a second separating the two. This is as close as Castleman has been so far, and so things are looking reasonably good, reasonably competitive for them. Sean, I'm going to let you just take the lead for a second. I've got to answer the phone.
Well, go for it. But yeah, sorry for the little drop out there. My network card just likes to be rude like that. But up at the front, Major Castleman, right before the disconnect, he had lost DRS, but he's back in it. A little bit of a peak in the engine tone you could hear there as the wheels spin up, but he is pushing hard. Habs fan Nick has caught back up to the back of Mako and is now getting into the DRS there. So we've got quite the train forming. Mako, Habs fan Nick, Elliott, Latzo's dropped back just a little bit, but we are getting kind of close to the pit window. Just local yellows. Hopefully you guys should be all back as well for the stream.
I think so. Yep, the stream looks live to me with my Twitch window open.
Perfect.
So I'm happy if you are.
Yep,
so Castleman once again is just able to stick in there with DRS. There was a big push from Nemesis that lap trying to break away, but it's ultimately come to naught, back down to about 3/4 of a second as they go into turn number 1. And as they'll now drive up the hill here, they will be close enough, Will Castleman, to get the DRS once again. So I expect that to come down to about 6/10 of a second by the time they get to turn number 4. That being said, though, I'm completely wrong. Back down to just about 3/4 of a second. So a good exit out of turn 3 for Nemesis there, where they were able to get themselves a bit further ahead, though it seems the exit of 4 hasn't been quite as good. They've lost a bit of time there. Habs fan Nick very close to the back of Mako here as they make this run up the hill towards 4. Turning in nicely, and the Ferrari then is pushing on, trying to get themselves into a good position here, because they're in a similar spot as to what we see for Daredevil and for the 2 Williams cars. Starting on that medium tyre, they're going to be potentially at risk of being passed later on in this race by fast-driving drivers who have... fast-driving drivers? That's good... that's good England there, isn't it? But yes, they'll be at risk from those hard-charging drivers on those medium or soft tyres towards the end who started on their hards here today. Now, again, we've had no safety car here.
We have our first taker off of the medium tyres. Latzo just came in, so it's our first scheduled pit stop. Obviously, Cruzo made an early stop for some damage, but he's come out now onto the hard tyres to go to the end of the race right behind Ruprath. So we may see that cascade start to form. The first driver, a little deep is Ruprath into turn 10 there. May give an opportunity as Latzo still looks to be getting those tires up to temperature. Tire warm-up may be an issue for when these medium tire runners come in to put on the hards. And that may be the advantage for the hard starters.
Absolutely might be. I think a driver I just want to give a shout out to at this point as well, given that we've not really had much reason to look at them so far on the broadcast, but they have been doing, I think, the best job of anybody in this race, save for maybe Major Castleman sticking with Nemesis on those slower tyres throughout this race so far, is Daredevil GG in 5th place at the moment, up 7 places on their starting position. As we see into the pits there goes Cryptic F1. into the box for the Alpine driver. But yeah, Daredevil doing a fantastic job. Only 3 seconds or so off the back of Clem, who in turn is 6.5 seconds off the back of Povey, who then, of course, benefited for a long while from that DRS train up at the front. And then, of course, has only recently fallen off the back of Nemesis and Castman, who have been really stretching their legs, really trying to create a gap here. And in terms of creating a gap, it might be that this time Nemesis might finally have just been able to shake Castleman. They're coming up towards turn 13 now, and the gap is 9.5 tenths of a second. If that gap maintains itself as they make the run down towards 14-15, then that's of course going to allow Castleman to have that DRS once again. But it was very close. It's getting closer, in fact, to being a second as they cross the line. No, Castleman is going to have DRS once more as they go on to start lap number 13. But as they do so, into the pits goes Nemesis. And Povey looks to have thought about going in as well, but they've now decided not to go for the double stack. Instead, they're going to continue. And so their teammate now potentially is going to get an undercut on them and be able to tear off into the distance even further ahead of Povey. That is not what they're going to be wanting at all.
Habs fan Nick is coming in as well. There was a yellow flag in sector 2. Queasy had a spin coming out of turn 11 there. Looks like he was able to keep it out of the walls, but could have been a huge swing if he had gotten into the barriers and needed a safety car to recover him. So now that Nemesis has made that stop, we will just have to wait and see where he comes out in comparison, because obviously Major Castleman's going to go much longer. And is there a mistake from Nemesis getting down into turn 1? Cold tires. And any hope of an undercut, that's really going to cost him. It's lost a good 3 seconds or so. So now he's likely to fall behind his teammate at this point.
Absolutely, yeah. And whether or not that will be communicated to Povey, of course, with their race engineers, that's for the Williams team to sort out. Those two drivers, of course, very competitive and very, very close in terms of their overall pace. But yeah, this time it looks as though Nemesis has had the better of them in this race so far. But now, of course, with that mistake, it gives Povey that opportunity to get back in front of their traditional rival over in Xbox. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but it's 3 titles Povey, 2 for Nemesis.
3 and 2, yep, that is correct, although Nemesis has the most recent. Nemesis won the first title. Povey ran off 3 straight. Nemesis took one in Season 5, and then LC Fighter took home the one last season, as Nemesis and Povey were very heavily plagued with technical issues.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there. Massive. I've just been on board with Nemesis. Massive, great big slide from them coming out the exit of turn 11 up towards turn 12, the dreaded cursed corner, of course. So it's it's looking like it might not work out for them. Let's see where MJ Povey comes out then. Their teammate is coming round the final couple of corners now then as they leave the pit lane. I think this is going to be well clear in the distance. Now they will have a tyre warm-up phase to deal with here, but I don't think that there are any real risk here. They take turn 1 much more tidily than their teammate did, and that is a net gain for MJ Povey of a couple of seconds there, it looks like, and several seconds in fact. Nemesis really not getting on with these hard tyres. Another big snap of oversteer there coming out of turn number 1. So Nemesis has gone from absolutely rapid on the mediums to now really struggling on the hards.
Yeah, and if it's an overall tire temperature issue, I know in the 22 game, tire temperature plays such a big role in grip. And if you've set up for ideal tire temperatures on the mediums, you may have a situation where you can't get the hards warm enough, as Ruprath picks up a 3-second time penalty for multiple track limits warnings. It looks like few drivers. Mako has picked up a 3-second time penalty, and there's full course caution. There's a safety car out.
Dear.
Has somebody crashed? It looks like a couple of cars tangled and were stopped. I believe safety car should have been set, I think, to reduce, but no retirements. But there is now a full safety car, and it's a little ahead of schedule for Castleman. He's into the pit lane. But he's going to have to run those mediums a little bit longer than he'd like.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, 3 laps or so behind the safety car where they won't really be doing too much damage to them.
Oh, no.
They've got a lighter car, of
speeding
course.
in the pit lane penalty.
Oh, dear. Mako, you were in contention for my Driver of the Day award before all of these penalties and mistakes started to crop up. Dear, oh, dear. That's not what we wanted to see there from them at all. But this does then close up the order again. It's going to be interesting to see then where they come out. Povey has come out behind Clem. So both Red Bulls have jumped both Williamses, which is very interesting indeed, given, of course, how far off the back Clem was of the 2 cars. Now then, with those mediums on, it's the reverse of what we saw at the start. And so will it be then that potentially the two Red Bulls will now have to run off into the distance, try and get as much distance between themselves and the Williams cars as possible, and then just hope that the Williams cars don't then come back to them at the end? What looked like an assured win for Castleman at this stage has now suddenly been tipped much more into a 50-50 shot here.
Yeah, Castleman's still in the catbird seat, so to speak. Does, though, help out Clem quite a lot. Of course, with a full safety car, you still have 3 laps to build that 1 second gap to keep out of DRS. At the early stages of the race, Clem was holding on as long as they had DRS. It was just as soon as they fell out of DRS is when they started dropping 3, 4, 5 seconds back. Now, the Williamses have to make their way past Clem in order to attack Castleman, and maybe there's a little bit of rear gunner going on. Castleman is just a reserve driver. He's not a full-fledged Red Bull teammate at this stage. So does Clem feel any kind of help for the driver in the same colors as them today, at least?
It's an interesting one, and of course, depending on attendance, it could be that maybe that Red Bull seat opens up and Castleman could take it again. And then if, of course, there are enough absences, they could just end up becoming the full-time Red Bull driver. So it's going to be an interesting one here to see where this all shapes out. But of course, at this early stage of the season, whilst Castleman might be a reserve, given that we've only had 15 drivers show up, that's 1 strike for 5 drivers at least, I should say, who've signed up and filled everything out. So I would say that Castleman is definitely someone who we could consider as a potential title contender here for Division 1. They thought they'd signed up, but that was on an old sign-up form, of course. So that's then meant that things have made life a bit more difficult for them in terms of getting a full-time drive. But like I say, I wouldn't count them out. I think it's definitely possible that they could end up sticking in for this whole season and doing very well. Not to talk about other leagues, but I'm going to for a second. There's another one I commentate on, which Castleman features in and has been doing very well in that. Was second in the very first race. So, you know, they've got themselves a good pedigree, I suppose you could say, in terms of racing on this game and doing well. And of course, with some of those big heavy hitters of the PC division of time gone by it opens up more opportunities for them and for everybody else in the field as well. So let's wait and see how this all shapes out. And Luke says, damn, just getting called out on stream by Dan.
Yeah, Luke is the other Luke. Red Bull driver officially. So.
I should have known. I did think to myself, now hang on. Fraser and Spike and Silver Arrow might not be here, but where's Luke? Luke is a driver who never lets me down until today. Luke.
But what we may have with Major Castleman is we may have a championship challenger that's in different cars every single week as a reserve. Because, you know, when Major Castleman says he's going to show up, he shows up. And I would expect that there's probably going to be at least 1 person missing from every race this season. I would be shocked if we have every single race. So I think Castleman may be sitting in a different seat next week while still challenging for wins. So it could be very interesting to see somebody with not contributing to the Constructors' Championship while scoring their own Drivers' Championship points. But looks like we just have Cruzo who needs to catch up the field. We usually would have gotten the safety car in message so far, but it has not given it. So it looks like we'll go one more time around before we get back to green flag racing. And of course, every single lap that they spend under safety car here helps out Castleman and Clem on those mediums. It's less life to take out of those tires. I think it's a good opportunity for them, and it looks like Ruprath is making a second stop in the pits.
Absolutely does, yep. We've got them shuffling down the order then behind Cryptic, and probably will fall behind Cruzo as well. Cruzo can travel at full racing speeds, of course, despite it being a safety car period. And so the Haas comes into the pits, is waiting, and then leaves eventually. But Cruzo does pass them, so there we go then. Cruzo up into P13 now. And, well, I said no preferential treatment, and I was right. They done goofed, everybody, did Cruzo. But we'll wait and see how the restart after this safety car period goes. In terms of this then, I mean, we saw drivers coming into the pits around sort of lap 14, 15 or so for those, or 13 even as well, for those medium tyres to come off and the hards to go on. Now, given that that was the case for tyres that were, you know, on the car from the start of the race when the cars were much more heavy with fuel, I reckon that at this stage, given that we've had 2 laps behind safety car for those medium tyre runners, I think that those mediums should be able to get to the end just fine. They might be perhaps a bit more marginal on the final lap, but the pace that they should be able to demonstrate to get out there ahead and away in the early stages of this next stint here lend me to think that they will be able to disappear off and have this one relatively comfortably, unless, of course, Povey and Nemesis are really able to fire up those hard tyres in the same way that Castleman was able to do in the first stint.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for the hard tire runners. We do get the safety car in this lap message, so Castleman becomes the de facto safety car, and we'll wait for him to send us back to racing once the safety car is fully into the pit lane. But yeah, that extra lap or so of safety car running may be just what the medium tires needed, and definitely got to work those hard tires in order to get them up to temperature. We already saw Nemesis kind of struggling with the hard tires out of the pit lane. Now they've gone right back down to a cold temperature. He needs to bring them up once again. It's going to be tough, but we'll keep an eye on the telemetry here for Castleman at the restart. See when he puts that foot down and goes back to racing, and there he
goes. Left his teammate napping a little bit there, I think. Povey is going to want to have a good look at them here in towards turn number 1. But Castleman's still doing a bit of a weave, trying to get even more heat into those tyres. And he might be contact between the Williams cars. Oh, so close. Nemesis just finding a matchbox worth of room around the outside in turn number 1. They then get swamped a bit in the next couple of corners. And now that means they might be vulnerable to Elliott on this run down towards turn number 4, though not this time. No, Elliott is in fact just a bit too far back. And Daredevil goes for a move that just didn't look like it was on. Corner cutting penalty and damage as well. Oh dear, that is not what we want to see at all from a driver who was going to be one of my driver of the day candidates, but that has now gone very much out of the window with that move there. Lucky there no damage to the AlphaTauri, it looks like at least, of Elliott's car. And Queasy Pluto having a great couple of corners battle here with Mako here, eventually getting the move done in towards turn number 10. Look at them behind, there's a big crash. Dante is taken out by Ruprath. And then Cruzo is able to now jump up into the top 10. They're right there with Lazzo. Habsfire Nick has been able to avoid the carnage as well. He's on those hard tyres, so they can just push all the way to the end now in that Ferrari. And if they're able to catch on and keep on the back of these cars in front by the time that DRS gets enabled, it could mean that they have a good chance to then stick with them. And then again, if there is any drop-off in those tyres, or if there are mistakes made, they could potentially find themselves even further up the points order by the end of this one. So good driving from them. Good driving as well at the head of the field. Major Gassman now ahead by 9/10 of a second versus their teammate. Their teammate in turn about 7.5 ahead of MJ Povey, who's about 8/10 ahead of their teammate. Although the gap between Povey and Clem rather has come down significantly on that start-finish straight. Though Povey goes a bit deep in turn number 1, loses them a bit of time both in front and behind. And here we then see Habsfire Nick going through turn number 1 then, and through 2 and up the hill through 3 and up towards 4. And it's looking like Castleman now has the measure over their teammate here, over a second's gap before DRS has been re-enabled, so they look to be in the clear for the time being. Meanwhile, Elliott is trying to get back onto the back of Nemesis here and within their DRS, after, of course, there was that tangle with Daredevil on the first lap after the safety car was pulled in.
Yeah, heartbreaking for Mako. At the restart, he was the one that was pressuring Nemesis, who of the top 4 kind of got the worst restart. Mako was getting ready to go down the inside of Nemesis when the Williamses came nearly together, and then, Mako kind of had to bail out to the runoff, and then got caught up in the Daredevil thing, and just has been shuffled down, and now has had to pit for damage. So Daredevil and Mako straight to the back of the field. Looks like Cruzo has had a spin. He's out of the top 10, and now Nemesis, the only one of the top 7, 8, 9, well, basically the only one that's within a second of any other driver on the field right now, as things are starting to gap out just a little bit, and Lazzo's starting to get into the edge of the Habsfire Nick's DRS range, but we may be down for another Williams battle as Castleman's setting another fastest lap of the race out in clean air.
I'm not sure it's going to be much of a battle here, I'm afraid, between the Williams drivers. Povey has already drained their battery down to less than 10% with that flashing light on the back of the car, and then into turn 1 there. Easy move up the inside for Nemesis. Looks like Povey's going to try and come back, though. They have indeed round the outside, so they're not going to let this one go. The 2 Williams cars clearly not experiencing any sort of a team orders scenario in this first round of the season. Up towards 4 they go. Up the inside goes Nemesis, and then on exit, Povey tries to get the up and under on them, but a good bit of car placement there from Nemesis to get themselves now into a solid podium position here. But through all of that fighting, that has allowed the top 2 to get away by nearly 2 seconds versus the Williams pairing. And all of that fighting has also encouraged the joining of the action for Elliott, who is also on those medium tyres that have allowed the top two to run away. So could it be that Elliott ends up joining this fight then with the Williams cars and now potentially threatens them getting on the podium here today?
Yeah, he could play a bit of a spoiler. Elliott, when confident, is a very quick driver. We'll see if he feels feisty and ready to fight in this one, as, you know, yeah, he is on the better tire, as you would think. If he can get the move done before lap 26, 27, I think the mediums will hold on just enough. Maybe the hards will have one shot to kind of come back at them on the last lap or so. But yeah, Major Castleman just using those mediums to run away. Clem's still on the mediums, but you know, it seems that there's a bit of a quicker driver. They're very close. They were within a couple hundredths of qualifying yesterday for pole position. Castleman really stuck it out today and is now, once again, showing some really, really strong pace, as the Williamses are a strong strong pairing. They're going to score a lot of constructors points because Castleman is not officially a Red Bull. But yeah, they may have gotten in their own way in this one.
I think so. It's also very interesting to note that the two of them have very, very similar deployment strategies. I won't say where they're deploying or anything like that, but going on board the last lap or so, and switching between the two, they're both using overtake in all the same places and have got less than 10%. You can see there from the flashing red lights on the back of those Williams cars. But I tell you who doesn't have less than 10%, Elliott behind them. They're biding their time at the moment, it seems, wanting to just get that bit closer before they go into full attack mode. Massive amount of ERS on board with that AlphaTauri, excuse me, I've got the hiccups at the minute. That's a little bit embarrassing. But yeah, closest battle on circuit at the moment is between the two Williams cars and Elliott. And then, of course, further down the order, we've got then this fight at the bottom of the points between Dante and Ruprath. If Ruprath ends up having any more mistakes, then, of course, they might lose that position. At the moment, they will lose that position anyway because of penalties. So that's something to keep an eye on for the closing stages of this race. We're lap 21 of 29 here in the Bahrain Grand Prix. So our race leader comes down towards the last couple of corners to finish out the lap.
Yeah, it looks like Povey and Nemesis, now that they've stopped kind of fighting each other, they are starting to reel in Clem a little bit. Clem is falling back from Castleman, so I think Nemesis and Povey have similar pace to Castleman out front. Clem just a couple hundredths to a tenth or so slower than their teammate. There's still an opportunity for those mediums to fall off just a little bit. They may not go completely off the cliff, but the hards may become a little bit quicker. It's now 1.2 seconds.
Slide!
Oh, up the inside
Big
is
slide
Elliott.
from Povey!
Mistake.
Yeah,
from
massive,
Povey.
massive slide from Povey. Big mistake. I was on board with Elliott as that was happening. They did a really good job down in towards turn number one, closed up the gap massively. Might have then spooked Povey, and they just got way too heavy on the loud pedal, and that then just meant that they lit up those rear tires, lost the back end, and they then fell away massively from their teammate, and of course left the door open to Elliott to come on by. A good bit of opportunistic driving there from Elliott, but just another mistake from Povey. Is the pressure getting to them in this first round of the season?
Yeah, we have seen it in the past that under pressure, Povey can get a little bit mistake prone, almost like we saw, you know, back in Cato's early days, where when he was really, really pressured, there would be some small mistakes creeping. Elliott has done well to stay within the DRS of Nemesis over the course of that, making that overtake that was really kind of unplanned to just react and not crash. But now he's got to try and catch up to Nemesis. It's back to 1.5 seconds for Nemesis, so he was making some headway on Clem, but now seems to have stabilized back at that 1.4, 1.5 kind of range. Lap 22 of 29, only 7-8 laps left to go in this one, and, you know, can Nemesis close that gap enough to try and get up into P2 as it stands in the podium? But Elliott sneaking into the podium as well.
Certainly could. Certainly could. I wouldn't count Elliott out just yet for anybody who's seen them racing before. Definitely a very quick driver, as again, Povey just a bit too deep into turn number one there. They've been able to stick within DRS for now, but with big late braking moves like that, trying to gain time, they may well end up losing the DRS here, as they did in the first stint. Yeah, out at the front, Castleman is doing a great job now, over 2 seconds ahead of their teammate, who's still got that 1.4 second gap to Nemesis behind. So currently, it's looking good for at least one of the Red Bulls to win this race, if not a 1-2, which of course will be great news for the folks back at Virtual Milton Keynes, who will be working on their setups and everything. And of course, I would imagine that the Div 1 drivers will then end up helping their Div 2 compatriots to go racing again tomorrow, of course. And now then, as we see all these DRS flaps opening up on the back of these cars, down towards turn number 11, for the Williams. It's looking good for them so far. Meanwhile, further down the order, we are looking at this battle now between the McLaren of Dante and then Ruprath in the Haas up in front. It's been very close between them for a number of laps now. Dante onto the mediums a couple of laps earlier than Ruprath, but of course 3 of those laps will have been run under that safety car period. So therefore there shouldn't be too much of a big difference between the tyre lives there. But in terms of that pace, I mean, of course, again, as I point out, Dante doesn't even need to pass Ruprath on circuit here. If they do, they then need to defend from them. They need to make up a 6-second gap and so on, but it doesn't look like they're going to be deterred from it. Oh, and way too late, pulling out from behind the Haas there from Dante, and they go from having one front wing to no front wing. Into the pits they're going to have to go, and that will elevate their teammate Cruzo up into the points. Who would have thought that at the start of this race?
Well, fortunately for them, it happened heading into turn 14, so they can immediately pull into the pit lane. But Nemesis now within almost a second of Clem. Elliott pressuring hard, so it doesn't look like there was a mistake from Clem. They've kept the gap to Castleman about the same, but Nemesis has really eaten up that 0.4 of a second and has gotten very close to being able. Are those mediums starting to fall off a little bit for Clem now that they're running in cleaner? Obviously, Elliott's getting kind of pulled along with DRS, but man, there may be a podium on the board for Elliott soon here.
There may well be, although that red light is now flashing on the back of the Alpha Tower as well. So what advantage they had earlier on, now that they no longer have it, I feel comfortable in saying so, it was a half of their battery. So over 40% more than what the 2 Williams cars had at the same time. They've used it to great effect in keeping with them and in keeping competitive with them, but now they need to rely on a good setup for good straight line speed, good DRS use, and then of course good late braking as well down in towards one of these heavy braking zones like turn number 1. They're coming through the final turn now, a half a second off the back of Nemesis, but Nemesis will have DRS themselves, so it's not likely to be an enormous increase in terms or decrease in terms of the gap here. But as they head down towards turn number 1, then how late does Elliott dare go on the brakes? Late enough where it looks like it's a very good run through turn 1 they had there. A little bit hesitant to get back on the throttle though through turn 2. But they are still overall closer to Nemesis now than they were at the start of the start-finish straight. And now then, into turn number 4, it could be here that if we start to get a queue forming from the back of Clem, that then Clem could end up driving defensively on their mirrors, opening that gap up to their teammate even more. And then, of course, if there is a slow-moving car at the head of that train, it could open up the potential for Nemesis to have Elliott dive-bombing them into one of the corners where they're having to follow slowly behind Clem. So, yeah, absolutely. Keep an eye on Elliott, everybody. That driver is one to definitely keep a watch on for the end of this race. Meanwhile, in terms of the platforms that we see in the top 10 at the moment, Xbox are doing very well overall. Big point scores for PC and PlayStation, but then also some lower point scores as well. So the midfield of the point scorers is very much dominated by Xbox at the moment. Consistent bunch of drivers, it seems.
Yeah, most definitely. One thing we'll kind of keep track of for fun, of course, we'll have the team's championship. Granted, it's only spread across 2 divisions this season, but we'll also be kind of keeping stats on the platform's point scores to see which platform is amassing points at the highest rate. But yeah, Nemesis now just a half a second back from Clem. Clem having to drive defensively to try and break the toe, makes their one move off, one move back. And now in the slipstream, is Nemesis going to have a lunge? No, they're just going to hold on the racing line. But now just under 0.3 of a second, the margin to that Red Bull. It's going to start to compromise how Nemesis can drive through the hairpins, turn 1 and turn, 7, I want to call it?
Yes, I think you're right. No, no.
Turn 8.
7 is 8, yeah.
It's 2 turns back from turn 10, which is one of the landmarks I actually remember.
Yes. Absolutely. Although interesting to note is that through all of this, Clem has been doing some ERS saving versus those cars behind. So again, that might be a good thing for them. It might allow them to just be able to keep back any DRS charges on the big overtaking straights. So yeah, good bit of race awareness there from Clem if they know that it's likely that things would close up again towards the end of this race. Mako's made their way back up to P11 then in the Aston Martin, overtaking Cryptic. It's a very close battle there between those two. In fact, it might be that Cryptic has another try back at them here in towards turn number 4. That being said, though, Mako's got the DRS open. No, not this time. So things as they were then out of turn number 2 for those two. Meanwhile, this battle that we want to go back to here is at the top end of the field then. So we're on board with Nemesis at the moment then. So the Williams driver is still trying their absolute best, their damnedest to get on by. But Clem is doing a good job in defense here. But as I predicted, they are now losing time enormously so to their teammate in front. Castleman now 3.1 seconds ahead versus just a lap ago. It was 2 seconds.
Yeah, I think they're pretty much driving as slowly as they can in certain areas just to save up as much battery to deploy. But there's like contact. There's a little bit of wheel banging into turn 1
Little bit.
Now Nemesis has the inside for turn 2. I think he may have had the nose ahead of Clem, though, as they came across the detection point. So Clem...
Yeah, but it's not over yet. Look at this. Good traction for the Red Bull now as they go in towards turn number 4. It's side by side again between the two cars. And now Clem trying to get the up and under done. It's wheel banging again as they head into the tight and twisty section.
Oh,
and then it's contact, contact, contact. 3 cars hit each other. And that then means that Povey manages to come out the least bad of all of that. But then, yeah, that means that Queasy and Habs fan Nick move up into P4 and 5 as Elliot there, an unfortunate casualty of the Red Bull of Clem going side by side with Nemesis. I must say, it didn't look as though from the off-board shot I could see that Nemesis gave a huge amount of room there to Clem. Looked as though they got pinched a bit too much, but again, that's all down to the stewards. If there is a stewards inquiry, exactly, very difficult to tell from the limited angle that we had there on that particular shot. But as it is then, your podium now consists of Major Castleman, Nemesis, and MJ Povey. With Povey now 5 seconds off the back of their teammate with a 2.8 second gap to Queasy Pluto behind. Habs fan Nick has done an incredible job in that Ferrari here today as well. In fact, the two of them, both the Alfa Romeo and the Ferrari, have done great work today, I think it's fair to say. And Elliot now goes from attack to defense as they are now being harassed by Latza into the final corner. Bit wide of the apex there, which is understandable given that Elliot is carrying that damage. No front right end plate on that Alpha Tauri anymore. So through certain corners, they will be compromised in terms of their aerodynamic grip. And then, of course, in a straight line, they'll also be compromised in terms of braking. But look at this then. Latza now having a look to the inside briefly before coming back to the racing line into turn number 1. And now then, as they make this run up the hill towards 4, is it going to be this time that they maybe go for a late audacious move? Might be. Let's take a look then as they make the run up the hill. It's a look to the inside, but not going to happen this time, I think. Clem is also there as well, wanting a bit more in the way of points to show for their efforts today. I really feel sorry for Clem if it was an incident caused by the other car. If not, if it was just a racing incident, then, well, that sometimes happens, you know. You've just got to kind of bear with it and hope that the results come your way in the next one. But as it is, looks racy at this late stage here. The Red Bull is now really close to the back of the Alpine as they head down towards 10, and it's a big mistake from the Alpine. The Alpine goes too deep for Latzo. No, and then on the power, Latzo end up going sideways and then hitting Clem. Clem now really badly damaged car there, and that's just meaning that they are having a worse and worse time of it.
Just horrible luck for Clem. I mean, maybe the initial incident with Nemesis may have been possibly a racing incident. I think in that case, you know, the person that I feel bad for in that case is Elliot, because they were sitting comfortably behind, just waiting to see which door opened, and then suddenly there was a sideways car in front of them. But then, just on throttle, a little too over-eager was Latzo on power, and Clem trying to get up the inside with that door being open. They were side by side, and unfortunately, once the back end steps out, there was nowhere for Clem to go, and just collecting bad luck. Damaged down in P8 now. It is the final lap of the race started. Now, it looks like they've stayed out, so they're just going to have to limp that car around. They've got a bit of a gap. 1 point some odd seconds to Ruprath. Ruprath carrying 6 seconds worth of time penalty, so Clem should be able to handle that, but we'll jump up towards the lead of the race here as Castleman is working through the middle portion of the lap. Just about a half lap to go to take the first race win of the season, perhaps.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been a very good performance from Major Castleman. Even if things go on in the last couple of corners here, it's been a great performance from them regardless. I'm just also keeping an eye on this battle that we've got between Queasy Pluto and Habs fan Nick, though I feel as though the opportunities have now run their course between those two, so I think that will stay as it is. But Queasy is getting closer and closer to Povey all the time here. That gap has come down massively. In fact, I don't think it's going to happen, but had that incident happened maybe one lap earlier, or this race was a lap longer, then it would be an opportunity. But an opportunity came calling for Major Castleman today as the Red Bull comes across the line to win the Bahrain Grand Prix, round 1 of the season in Division 1. Nemesis comes home for what could potentially be a very lucky second place after that contact late on there with Clem. Could have gone either way, really. Could have been both cars round, could have been just Nemesis there. Povey comes home for P3. Queasy Pluto by just 7/10 after him comes home P4. Hamsfan Nick comes home less than half a second behind the Alfa Romeo. Then Elliott recovers to P6. Clem recovers to 7th after that contact late on there. Latzer ends up dropping back to P8. Ruprath manages to take P9, unless, of course, the penalties are so severe they drop behind Mako, but I doubt that's going to happen. Mako up to the line. And all briefly there for a moment, Cruzo moved up in front of them, but no, time penalties applied, and Cruzo finishes P11 by 0.3 of a second. Cryptic comes across the line P12, Daredevil 13th, and Dante rounds out the order in the McLaren.
Yeah, I think late on that Latzo let Clem through on that final lap, but man, unfortunate for Clem. Podium position, almost assured a P2, maybe could have gotten caught up, but side-by-side, mistakes made, and then an extra crash on top of it. Tough day for Clem, who was running at the sharp end, but the pace is there, so we will just have to see how they go the rest of the season. Yeah, I think Castleman's going to find a seat pretty early, and it should be a good season. There's plenty of battling. Those Williamses are performing as we anticipated.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Williams pairing looks strong, but potentially volatile. Two drivers who are fighting with each other an awful lot in their own team, thinking about personal glory rather than potential team's championship points. And if this round is anything to go by, we are in for an excellent Season 7 here in the FRS. Just to confirm them, the provisional results pending any potential stewards' inquiries, Major Castleman takes the win the first round of the season ahead of the two Welshmen, Nemesis and MJ Povey. Then we have Queasy Pluto, Habsfan Nick, Elliott, Clem, Latzer, Ruprath, Mako, Cruzo, Cryptic, Daredevil, Dante, and False Tax as our only DNF of the session. Now then, driver of the day for you, Quimbulus. What are you going to say? I know that I'm torn between two here.
Well, before I get to driver of the day, just a quick note. Mako snuck into the top 10 and did grab the fastest lap in that race, so he managed to snag an extra point there. But
certainly did.
Yeah, for driver of the day, I think if I'm assuming that the incident was a racing incident, I'm going to go with QX Nemesis because he had that trouble, exiting the pit stop, lost the position to his teammate, then came back, took that position on the restart, after the restart, bunched everything up, and then managed to catch all the way back up and slot themselves into P2. So for me, I think QX Nemesis is my personal driver of the day. Daredevil was up there until the torpedo moment.
Interesting. I'm torn between two, and neither of them is Nemesis. Interestingly, we've got controversy already between the commentators, and it's only round one. My two picks for driver of the day, because I really can't pick between them. One, Major Castleman for running.
What? Oh, why? Why have we lost the audio? It doesn't say I've lost the audio. I'm going to go back to this other screen just in case. Can you hear us now? Because I was still getting lights and pings on my audio.
Yeah, so I could see
Turbo?
that as well.
Turbo, can you...
I can slightly hear Kobe, but from a different mic, he says. Interesting.
Yeah,
well, I tell you what,
something's broken with that. I'll fix it. It may have been.
We'll fix it. We're getting the rust off for the first round of the season. It should be.
So I don't think they heard your driver of the day then. So I think you should go back and say your driver of the day.
Yeah. So driver of the day for me then, either Major Castleman for running a perfect race, and then the other pick I would have would be Queasy Pluto. Great drive that went really under the radar, made some good moves. and then, yeah, just kept their nose clean, kept themselves out of trouble. I think it would have been an outright driver of the day for me, though, had Habs and Nick been able to get that position on the final lap there when they came home just 0.4 of a second behind Pluto. But they didn't, so it goes to Pluto or Castleman for me today.
Yeah, Nick had a shocker of an opening to the race. He dropped right down the field. I think in the end he finished basically where he started. But
I think a bit higher, in fact. I think P5 was.
Oh, that's right, because of the shambles in the last two laps. Which, that's at least racing incident style shambles. Those are the shambles we want to see. Torpedoes into. We had a clean turn one. We didn't have a safety car until.
We did.
We didn't have a safety car until over halfway through the race. I think that's a pretty good start as far as the season goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with all that being said and done then, everybody, thank you very much for joining us for this first round of the season. We have plenty more to come, and I'm sure it will be as exciting as it has always been here in the FRS. But for now, from me, Daniel Gilligan, alongside me in the virtual commentary box, Sean Provenza, thank you very much for watching, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.